I call this February 25th, 2019 Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. First item we have is the approval of the minutes of the February 11th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes of February 11, 2019.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Okay. Past the hour of 7 p.m. We have a hearing to consider an application for a special one-day license is submitted by Lisa Hodge on behalf of the Algonquin Regional High School Boosters Club for a fundraising event to be held at C'est La Vie Bistro at 30 Main Street. So if you want to come on up. And tell us a little bit about your event and what you're doing.
I am representing tonight the Algonquin Regional High School Boosters. 2 years ago, we hosted the same event called Evening at the Bistro, and it's a fundraiser for our athletics program. So we didn't do it last year, but we decided to bring it back this year. We were originally going to have it on March 8th, but due to a lot of teams making playoffs, and there was a DECA event and a play at Z School, we decided to push it out a little. So that's why there's a date change on it of the 22nd. Tickets are $50 for an individual, $75 for 2 people. It includes food from C'est La Vie and some appetizers and desserts that we're bringing in. Cold Harbor Brewery, which is a brewery in Westborough, who's owned by a Northborough resident, Will and Jen Oliveira. They are donating beer for the event, and then we'll also be providing wine. So the tickets include food, beer, and wine, and then all proceeds go right to the boosters, and then we'll therefore help our athletes.
Thank you. Now, on your application, you did say that all the bartenders will be tip certified?
Yes, we are having bartenders provided for the event. They'll be handing out everything, serving, I should say.
Okay. And this is limited to 75 people?
Yeah, we're limiting it to 75. That's the maximum that we'll sell tickets for.
Questions from the board?
Can I put in a reservation for tickets?
We would love to have, we have plenty to sell, so
Right.
please. And also parking, just so you know, there's not a lot of parking there, so people are told to park at the library if there's no spaces in the lot.
Any other questions, Jason?
Yeah, this is just general fundraising for the boosters to expend the money as they see needed across the different sports programs. It's not any particular project or anything that's...
No, it's going to go to our general fund, and it's not for a specific team or anything. It just goes to our fund. It's kind of also just a way to get people together, and it's an excuse to get out. There's nothing formal happening at the event. It's open to anybody, and you don't have to be a member of Boosters to attend it either. It's just a night out, and I mean, there'll be a little talk about sports, but it's just a social event. Yeah.
Well, sounds like a great cause. Anybody?
Yeah, it's a fun night. It's a fun night. And C'est La Vie is a cool place to go to, so. Yeah.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I have a question first before we vote. So did you mention that on your certificate of liability, you're going to have to change the date?
Yes, we sent an email out to the insurance company today, so she usually takes a day or two to get back to us, but that's why it originally is dated for the 8th, and she'll just have to change it to the 22nd.
Okay, so when we vote, should we vote pending that correction?
It's part of the application. If they don't have that certificate, they're not authorized to hold the event. So if we don't receive, if our office doesn't receive that, then they can't hold the event. So I wouldn't worry about it as far as the motion.
Do I send that back to the building department? No. Or to you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to approve the application for a special one-day license as submitted by Lisa Hodge on behalf of the Algonquin Athletic Boosters Club for a fundraising event at C'est La Vie Bistro at 30 Main Street on Friday, March 22nd, 2019, between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. The license shall include the 24-hour period immediately before and after the event in order to allow for the proper delivery and disposal of all alcoholic beverages prior to and immediately following the event.
Second.
It's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Have a great event.
Thank you. And tickets can be purchased through our Facebook page. We have a link or on our website. if anyone's interested.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Possible.
Lisa.
Thank you.
It's entirely possible.
Brings us to reports. Julianne?
So, I'm going to allow Kathleen Polanowitz to report in public comments about the White Cliffs. We had a meeting on February 22nd, and she just drafted a beautiful summary for the committee, so I think that I'll leave that up to her. And the other thing that I wanted to comment on is that on March 5th, there is a meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendments, and there are 6 proposed changes, and hopefully people can attend, and if you're interested, there's more information on the homepage, the town's homepage.
Okay. Kathleen, you can comment under public comments as you planned on? Okay. Okay, does that conclude your report?
That's it, yes, thank you.
Okay. Tim?
I just attended a groundwater advisory committee meeting last week. Just a couple of things, nothing too earth-shattering going on over there. I do want to thank the people that do serve on that committee for their time. Also attended the master plan steering event that was held a couple weeks ago. They've made quite a bit of progress. It's really impressive what they've been able to put together. I was also impressive too when being at the event, going around and talking to people, how informed everybody was that was there with answering questions. Selectman Perot's done a great job on that as well. And then lastly, I have gotten a few more messages and calls from concerned parents about the bus stops in town. Again, it's if you do see people passing buses when they're stopped, you know, take note of the license plate number. If you get a cell phone, videotape it, and then call the police department. The police department has been very responsive and in issuing tickets when warranted. So they can't be at every bus stop at every point during the day. They do the best that they can, and you know, you can take some of the responsibility yourself and report that. That's it. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie?
Okay, I just wanted to thank both chiefs for the reports that I know that we will be getting. They're always very informative. We appreciate them. And all the items that you include in there, things of public interest and statistics, all those things, so thank you. Again, I wanted to reiterate the need to stock up the food pantry. I did look at the website tonight. To be honest, I'm not sure how updated it is, but they do have on there a list of the top 10 items that are needed there. And there are also some phone numbers on there for the coordinators. And feel free to give them a call and find out, too, as well, what might be needed. Also, as you may know, that there are some clothing and shoe bins at each of the schools, and they would love your donations because they are taken and weighed, and the schools, primarily the PTOs, receive some revenue from that. So if you want to support the schools and the PTOs, which do a lot to support the schools, I strongly encourage people to use those bins as well. And finally, I wanted to thank the DPW, Scott Charpentier, DPW Director, for all your work with all the snow and ice storms and things like that. I never envy you guys having to do all that at different hours, but you do a great job and the roads always look great. So thank you very much. And that's my report.
Okay. Jason?
Yes, I have a few items. One, just to remind people that on April 6th at the Haven Country Club, we'll be holding the 150th Jubilee for the Northborough Free Library. Tickets are $75 per person, includes dinner and dancing, and we just hope people would like to come out for an entertaining night and just support your local library in doing that. As mentioned, on February 13th, we held the latest public information forum of the Master Plan Steering Committee. The attendance was a little lighter than we expected, but I think in a way it worked in our favor because many of the people who did attend were able to circulate among the different exhibits for each of the categories we're addressing and have very candid conversations with the representatives on the committee who are manning those stations. So worked out very well. Appreciated Selectman Kalen's attendance. Also Henry Squillanti, who's in the audience, Carrie Martinek, who's in the audience. Just appreciate the people who turned out, and we thank them for their interest and appreciate the input that they've had into the process. Also want to thank Public Safety and Public Works for today. All the fun you had with high winds and tree limbs down and power outages and all that thing. Just a lot of hassle for you guys, but we appreciate your being on the job and taking care of that for us. This Saturday, March 3rd, 10 to 11 a.m., Habitat for Humanity will be having a dedication for 37 Main Street, which is the latest renovation project being done to provide affordable housing. We have the new occupants of that housing who will be on hand, and we just encourage people, if they're interested, to come through and just make the acknowledgement of the excellent work that was done on that project between Habitat for Humanity, Community Preservation Act monies that were used to fund part of the project, and also the students at Assabet Regional High School who were strong contributors to a lot of the actual work that was done. It's a win-win for us to get the project done at lower cost and for them to get the real-world experience for all the construction and plumbing, electrical, all kinds of work that they do. So we really appreciate their input for this. And finally, I just note the retirement of Finance Director June Hubbard Ward. We appreciate the many years of service to the town of Northborough. And I'd like to congratulate Town Accountant Jason Little, who's been promoted to the Finance Director position. Jason's just been a very hardworking and strong contributor to the financial stability that we have in the town, with the financial policies, with his meticulous attention to detail and diligence. As I just want to read the quote because I sent him an email. I said, I look forward to continued high standards, stellar financial management, and deadly dull audit reports each and every year. So thank you, Jason, for all the work you've done. Congratulations on the new position. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. First, I'd like to report that Amy Rogers is resigned from the Community Affairs Committee, and by agreement, we send a letter of thank you to her. Thank you. And the Fire Station Building Committee met this morning. It's been decided that on April 4th, we will hold another joint meeting of all the committees, the financial committees, with the Board of Selectmen and the Building Committee at 7 p.m. that evening. So if you'll hold that open, we're not sure exactly where yet. It depends on if the library's open.
What's the date again?
April 4th.
April 4th.
If the library's open, we will have it there, but stay tuned for where we'll be. The Fire Building Committee has selected 61 through 65 West Main Street, the old Pierce Station property, and 10 Monroe Street as the preferred site, and the designs are going forward using that site. So there'll be more to come, and we'll report as we go along on it. But on the 4th of April, there should be a projected cost, and the warrant article will have the money in it for acquisition and design. So that concludes my report. John?
No report this evening.
Okay. Public comments. Kathleen?
Sure. So, thank you to Julianne. I'm sorry to bring. Thank you to Julianne for asking me to be here and to give a brief update for the board. So we've had some really good progress on the White Cliffs Committee and on the project. I've provided to the board a brief summary of where we've been for those who haven't been following it closely or haven't been in town, and then a little update on where we are. As most of you know, the town recently retained DBVW architects to be the architects for the project. And we were lucky enough earlier at the end of last week to have a meeting with them and hear their initial update on where they are with the project. And once the town was able to execute the agreement with DBVW, They just hit the ground running when they were over there the next day. They've been doing laser surveys of the interior and exterior of the building so that we can access that information. We paid a certain fee, which was smaller, to have the information available to us, and as we need it or want it, there's a fee to make it more and more detailed, and it's super cool. But the most exciting thing that we learned, two things. One, the initial assessment of the building indicated that the historic portion of the building was in much better condition than what the architects had anticipated. So they were able to fairly specifically identify where the few leaks in the historic building are coming from, and they're working to put some documents together with John to go out to bid to repair those finite issues that the building is having in the historic portion. They're still working on the addition portion and didn't have recommendations on that quite yet, but we have a meeting scheduled in a month to hear from them on a broader array of topics. So I think I can speak, Julianne, for the members of the White Cliffs Committee that we were really thrilled to hear that the condition of the building was better than what could have been anticipated. So that's great. The other thing that was super exciting, I know Dawn, you've been involved in this, and a couple of other folks from town have been trying to figure out who the architect of the building is. And Norm Corbin from the White Cliffs Committee and Historic Commission has been working on this extensively. He's reached out to the Wessons, and it's been hard to figure out who the architect is. And we've had DBVW for about 6 weeks, and they've been able to tentatively identify the architect of the building, Benjamin Hammett Seabury, who is a fairly famous architect and has a number of homes on the historic register. He's out of Springfield. So they're doing some more research to make sure that their conclusions are right. But in the email that I forwarded to you all, there's the text of the June 3rd, 1893 article from the Springfield Republican describing White Cliffs and referencing Mr. Seabury. So this was a big aha for us, and for those of us that are kind of historic buffs, this was very exciting. So we'll have more to report on that. And what's interesting about that is it's the receptionist at DBVW who's a little bit of a historic geek, and she was the one who was doing the research when she wasn't working on other things. So our architects and other consultants are working diligently on the house, and we just got this little extra bonus. So I just was excited, and I thought you might want to know what we found out this week, and so you've got it all written in your packet, and John's distributed it to the other boards, committees, and commissions. But thank you for letting me give you the good news thus far.
No, it sounds great. It sounds like it's moving forward.
It's moving forward.
So,
thanks to all the townsfolk who voted for
Good
it.
question, Kathleen.
Sure.
Explain the laser survey and what results from that.
Okay, so I'm a layperson, so this is my understanding of it, but it used to be back in the day that they would survey the interior of buildings using tape measures, and they would measure everything. And because White Cliffs is so detailed on the inside, that would be virtually impossible to do. And so now there's this technology where and John, are you better at this than me?
You're doing great.
You're smiling, and I'm not sure if that means.
I want to see what you say.
Okay, so they have this technology now, and it is lasers. It's not dangerous or anything, and it spins, and it takes in almost 365 degrees in the room, and it takes in changes in color and heat. And so you can actually see the brocade on the walls inside, all of the elevations of the wood. They do it on the outside as well. And the beauty of it is, we've budgeted a certain amount of money for this project, and you can spend from X to Y on this technology. But over here at X, the lower amount gets you all the data on the disk that your architect holds, and then as you need to access it, you can pull it out of the computer and utilize it. And depending on the detail that you need, there might be a different price point pulling it out of the data and developing it. So our committee, the White Cliffs Committee, voted to definitely access the technology and get the data, and that's going to be held until we need more and more detail, if we need more and more detail. So that's all going to be preserved in perpetuity unless they change the technology someday and make it better, so that we have that. And it's because of the elevations in that building, it's so important to get that detail. So we've got that now.
Excellent, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would only add that so we had DPW go in and remove all the window dressings and the hardware, so that we'd get a detailed scan, because as you know, every room is done in a different kind of wood. with people flowing in from Italy and other places to do these carvings. So the laser scan is so detailed that you actually picks up the carvings. So, so that initial data that we grabbed, as Kathleen said, we have that, and then they create renderings from that. And it's the creation of those renderings in various levels of detail that you can get basically an entire virtual interior model as if you're walking through every bit of that building. So it's amazing
It looks like a
technology. But
photograph.
they're actually coming back again in a couple of days to scan some more of the attic area. So they're getting in the basement, they're getting the attic and the full exterior. So this is what the plans will be drawn from, and it's far more accurate in an old building like this where things aren't necessarily all level after, all these years. But the data's there, and it's really phenomenal technology. And we've saw some samples. They brought in samples of the renderings that you can draw, that you can create from this laser scan, and it's absolutely amazing. So.
Great.
And it's helpful in their assessment of the condition of the building, so. And Madam Chair, with your permission, I just wanted to say thank you to the police department and the DPW, because DPW did go over there and really went above and beyond to make sure that those scans were perfect, because if the curtains had been there, they wouldn't have seen the trim. I mean, it's a small detail that I think John thought of in conjunction with the architect, but DPW went over and did that work for us promptly and beautifully, and so I'm very grateful for that. And also, people should know, that building is being, the police department is doing regular 24-hour-a-day drive-bys on every shift to assess the condition of that building, make sure there's nobody trespassing up there, that there aren't any kids up there getting into trouble. So thank you very much for, it's a town asset and we want to preserve it, and so the town administrator, all the departments in town have been really spectacular in their help with this project, so appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Any other public comments? Okay, hearing none. New business. Okay, review of amendments to Town Code, Chapter 9-12-010, appointments to boards and committees, and Chapter 9-12-011, reappointments to boards and committees. With the help from Jason, we have a nice draft in front of us. Diane and the town staff reviewed it, and I think everybody did a great job. It picks up everything we talked about last week in order to make it a more transparent process, having an agenda, having minutes, how the vacancies will be posted, and then what the interview committee will do. Also submitted, we have a new application form. And basically, as Leslie knows and Jason knows, who both served on the interview committee, this is basically the questions we ask anyway. So it's some of the questions that will be asked, and it will just help us with the minutes to know what the answers are, and everything basically will be up front. So unless somebody has questions, this really doesn't need talking about again. But Leslie.
Yeah, I read through this a few times, just to make sure that everything seemed to be, make sense and be orderly and sequenced and all that sort of thing. There is one item that I would like to discuss or add potentially under applicant database, item number 3.
Okay.
It says, any application received, whether a position is currently vacant or not, shall be maintained on file in the Selectmen's office for a period of 6 months from the date it is received. It is the responsibility of the applicant to update the application as needed to ensure the information remains current and accurate with respect to applicants' BCCs of interest, qualifications, and contact information. And then I added something like, the application may be resubmitted, or someone calls die to renew, so that the application can be kept for another 6 months, because I don't necessarily think that 6 months is a particularly long period of time. So maybe at 6 months, it's up then to the applicant to calendar it for 6 months, call the town hall, and, or some, by some other means, and make sure that they can continue to keep their application on file for another 6 months.
Can I, through the chair, if I may?
Yeah.
I put the 6 months in there, or I suggested to
Oh.
Jason. That was my request.
Okay.
Because anything beyond that is just going to be too onerous on us to maintain. If somebody applies for a job, you keep it for 6 months. If you apply through civil service, it's good for that's the industry standard for applying for pretty much anything, where the material and the information is current, but also, it's gonna get difficult for us. We would need to be able to, clean the files, and if people are still interested, we're going to be doing a much more excessive approach to posting and advertising, so people know. So respectfully, 6 months was mine, and that's really what I would like to keep. I think anything more than that's going to be, administratively, is going to be tough for us to hang on to. People can always, if they submit it, from whenever they submit it, we'll hold it for 6 months, but, my concern is just, kind of keeping things in perpetuity. It's just, it gets real messy real fast. So we wouldn't hold anything, like if we had a internal promotion or we would do something like that, we would keep it for 6 months. So that's always my suggestion.
Leslie?
I'm not necessarily saying keep it in perpetuity, but I think there needs to be a means by which the applicant can contact Town Hall and say, I will either be in with a new application, you can get rid of the old one and add a new, but I just want to make sure that there's some encouragement or continuity to the whole thing so that people don't feel like, okay, 6 months, that's it. On the other hand, I do feel it's up to the applicant to calendar it if they're that interested in it, because there could be some committees where nothing opens up for a while. So they need to be able to contact Town Hall and say, either throw it out and here's some new. I just want to make sure that that's in there, because I think we need to make sure that the document is welcoming and encouraging of people to apply for things. Because it also sets the tone for that.
Jason?
To some extent, I'm kind of seeing this as an interim step. We're going to improve the process we already have in place, and some of that is essentially paper copies of these applications and everything. But we also have in progress, or soon to be in progress, the IT reevaluation through the Community Compact grant. And it seems to me that, that will go toward a full evaluation of our IT services and recommendations for improving those services. I could foresee at some point where a lot of this information might just be done electronically. People would submit it.
Right.
They'd get potentially reminders to get, it's due to expire. You have a grace period to try to renew it if you are still interested. Otherwise, it expires, and it doesn't, it's easier and more automated in a sense
Right.
to do that. So,
But it's-
I mean, I can't say that that's exactly what's going to happen right now, but I anticipate that as we look toward improving our IT services and our website and everything like that, that's certainly something that potentially could, be an improvement or something and reduce the
And-
paperwork effort, through town hall.
And I do think that when people do an application, if Diane tells them this is good for 6 months, you can reapply in 6 months, it takes care of what you're really saying
Yes.
anyway.
Yep.
So without amending this and making it more wordy, I think Diane can handle it just when she gives somebody an application.
Well, actually, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
saying something like that actually is good, so that it's at the end of that particular item that renewal can be made. Like you're saying, it could vary in the future as far as how it's done, but that can be done. It's not like at the end of 6 months, that's it.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, okay,
there's no reason that they can't just reapply.
okay, good.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'll just say it's somewhat implied, maybe not stated as explicitly as that, but it is the responsibility of the applicant to update the information, or update the application as needed to ensure the information remains current and accurate. So in that sense, you're trying to keep the information accurate, but you're also, in effect, renewing, the application. Yes, I'm sorry.
Leslie?
Well, it needs to be clear, because when I read that, it sounds like it's up to the applicant to make sure that the information is up to date within that 6-month period that application is on file. I just think we need to clarify a little bit so that there is an understanding that it can be renewed or resubmitted, however that happens to be.
And would it be better, instead of putting it in this, that it just goes on the application itself? This application is good for 6 months. Please reapply at the end
Right.
of 6 months.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Would that work for you, Diane? Okay, so
That would cover that.
we'll put that on the application form.
Sounds good.
Julianne?
So I think that this is a great document and really encompasses almost all of what I would have liked to have seen. There are a couple of things that I would like to bring up for consideration. The first thing would be that after number 1, under public notice of vacancies and term expirations, within number 1 or in addition to it, could we say, notice shall specify name of committee, 2, directions for applying, 3, a closing date for acceptance of applications, and number 4, a contact phone number?
I didn't follow you at all. Can you do that over,
So, did you want me to repeat that?
please?
Okay. So, all right, so I guess I should start with, all right, so for everyone out there, public notice of vacancies and term expirations. Right now, it says notice of BCC, which is the boards and committees, vacancies, and upcoming term expirations shall be posted at the town clerk's office, on the town website, and on the cable television government access channel. Could we add, notice shall also specify the name of the committee or committees with vacancies, directions for applying, a closing date for acceptance of applications, and number 4, a phone number for contact?
Go ahead.
May I just make one suggestion, that we, these tend to be rolling vacancies, so I would not put a closing deadline in. They tend to be open until filled, is pretty much how we approach them. So, with the exception of that, the rest of the comments are fine. I mean, I think it would be fine.
Certainly add that detail.
Okay, so we'll add that detail without that, unless anybody else is in favor of it.
Yeah, if I could, in the section specifically addressing vacancies, I do specify at least a period of 2 weeks for the position to be advertised before any action would take place. We can't say exactly when it would close or when action would take place, because we don't even know if we would have any applicants. So
Okay.
we certainly want to specify a minimum period for people to have sufficient notice and to be able to submit an application if they're interested. So,
Okay.
For example, like the zoning board of appeals, we recently filled a vacancy that was vacant for 4 years. So to put a term that we wouldn't accept people afterwards would be probably the wrong thing to do.
Okay. All right, so I have just a couple others. With number 3, would it help, so we have dates for notification of incumbents and term expirations. So where it says upcoming BCC term expiration should be posted coincident with the interview subcommittee's annual review period for BCC reappointments, which is it February 1st to April? So we give out notices by February 1st if a term is up, right?
Diane, what were your dates?
yes, February 1st.
So could those dates be included in that, so people kind of know?
Yeah.
Any opinion?
Yeah, I mean, if I could, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Just to explain my thought process, I was trying to divide this up into topical areas to some extent. So one topic was the notion of applications and people submitting information. A second one was the topic of public notice, the fact that we were making more of an effort to have a public notice period. Not necessarily to be all that specific in this section about exactly the dates and timing and everything. And then, because there's the notion of the interview subcommittee as the agent through which we interview the candidates. And then finally, 2 sections, one for specifically addressing vacancies, which could occur at any time. And then the second one following that, which is reappointment of terms that are expiring.
Right.
Which have slightly different considerations in terms of the posting requirements and the durations and things like that. So rather than try and embed that in the public notice section, what I did was try and comment on the notice period for each of those two things within their respective sections. For vacancies, at least a 2-week notice period. For term expirations, the specific dates of the process, when the first notice would go out and when responses need to be received.
Okay,
So I think what you're
Yeah.
asking for is addressed. It's not specifically called out in the section regarding public notice.
right. Okay, so if everyone feels that, because I do see that you listed it here,
Yes, yeah.
and I
Because,
guess that
yeah,
makes sense, yeah.
If it was, a little bit of a trade-off on my part, just to address the issue of public notice, to say, we definitely will advertise these and give it sufficient time, without being quite as specific there about specifically the dates and everything, or the timing. And then for the two sections on vacancies and reappointments, or term expirations, be more specific in those sections, because that's what somebody might go looking at when they're actually looking to see, if I'm interested in a vacancy, what do I have to do? If I'm interested in a term expiration, what do I have to do? So,
Okay. Okay, and then,
thank you, Madam Chair.
so then, in the interview subcommittee section, could we add as number 4, how we base the decision? So something like, appointments shall be based on merit and qualifications. Where possible, the board will seek variety in backgrounds, interests, ages, genders, and geographic areas of residence, so that town boards and committees will reflect a true cross-section of the community.
I'm not interested in adding that, but is anybody else? I mean, I think that's what we try to do, but we're lucky to get applicants most of the time.
Well, I'm throwing it out there because I think it needs to be said how we decide on appointments. And to say it is based on merit and qualifications and what we're looking for is, I feel it's legitimate.
Jason?
I would not have any objection to adding something that specifically and maybe narrowly confines it to merit and qualifications and, in some sense, suitability for the committee. But I don't know that I'm enthusiastic about going beyond that.
Sections of the community.
Trying to be more specific or more broad in some sense. As it's been stated, in my experience over the last 20 years in this town, serving on committees, the tendency has been, in many or most cases, that you have fewer applicants than you have vacancies or open positions on these committees. I think it's a remarkably unusual circumstance that you're having to select from multiple candidates and trying to balance out your selection process on the basis of those other considerations.
John?
I just going to comment, it's like any other HR process, I would just be concerned narrowing down the criteria such that, if you get an applicant, they look great on paper, or they have qualifications, but there might be another reason why they're not appropriate for a board or committee. And I guess just in general, you may want to leave things broadly to your discretion. Sometimes there are reasons why somebody doesn't get appointed to a board or committee, although they might look great on paper. There might be some other reasons. So, I wouldn't want, I would just be careful trying to define something too closely, because there may be other reasons, some of which you may not want to get into publicly as to why somebody isn't appropriate on a board or committee.
Right.
So,
In all the years that I've been on the interview committee, and I've done it a lot because I can make the time when other people couldn't, that if there's more than one candidate, we certainly look for the best candidate, or it's somebody that's going to fit and suitability. I think that's something that the board's naturally going to do. They don't have to be told to do that. I don't think they need directions to do that, but, Tim?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. The whole point of the interview process is to appoint somebody that has merit and qualifications. If somebody comes in, I would think that even if they're the only person applying for a board, if they come in and they don't have merit and they don't have the qualifications, the interview subcommittee is gonna say, well, you don't have the right qualifications to serve on the board, sorry. Like, the whole point of having the interview process is to find, like, that's just,
So you're saying it's a given?
yeah, it's just, that's the whole point of the interview process is to find people, like, it doesn't need to be stated. It's like when I go to a liquor store, I know they're gonna have liquor. It's just, it's the whole point of,
Example.
you know, like, it's the,
I like that analogy.
no, you know, like, if you walked into a liquor store and they didn't have liquor, you'd be like, well, this is a little odd, you know, like, it's, the whole point of the interview is to
And
vet out people that have merit in the qualifications. To your point, Don, I don't think it's necessary to put in that that's the outcome that we're going for.
no, and many times we have people that come in that don't have experience, but they go on a board with people that do have experience, and there's a learning curve, as both of you are learning this year.
Right, but that's merit for, you know, you have the merit to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and that's exactly, it's a learning curve sometimes, and sometimes people don't have any real recommendations as far as being on the committee, except they're interested.
Mhm.
So that would be my take. Leslie?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, you know, the merit and qualifications are paramount. Did you mention age and gender?
So, you know, I'm sort of copying and pasting from other town websites, and I did like so it said, appointments shall be based on merit and qualifications. Where possible, the board will seek variety in backgrounds, interests, ages, genders, and geographic areas of residence, so that town boards and committees will reflect a true cross-section of the community. I think that's from Boylston
Leslie?
or Southborough.
Yeah, I just think that, let's say, what if you have a committee and everybody is, you know, between the ages of 30 and 40, and another 30-year-old comes in who's extremely qualified? Are you going to say, well, we already have too many your age, so despite the fact that you're qualified, we're not going to take you because you're not rounding out our committee well? I think that ultimately what happens is the merit and qualifications are what rise to the top anyway, because probably in that situation, you're going to say, wow, you're so well qualified, I don't want to lose out on you simply because you don't fit into the age that we're looking for, or men versus women, that kind of thing. You know, and getting back to the fact that we don't have a lot of applicants, you don't want to then start turning someone away if they're qualified, because they were another person of that same age, for example. That's why I would disagree with that kind of detail.
Jason?
I don't think I would be any more specific except to say, as you said, merit qualifications and maybe in the most general sense, the best interests of the town. The people who serve on these committees are serving the town, and they need to be qualified. They need to be able to work constructively with the other committee members. And so in taking, you know, our responsibility as an appointing authority to do that, I think we have to have as much latitude as possible to ensure that, you know, we have the best possible people in our collective judgment to fill these positions.
And I think 4 of us feel that this is basically implied already.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we need to keep going on this unless somebody else has something to say. So, Julian?
So I just have a couple of other things then. Would it be wise to suggest that, that we try as much as possible to appoint people for one committee and not multiple committees as much as possible?
I'm not in favor of that either, but. Jason?
I guess I'm not familiar necessarily with who might currently be serving on multiple committees and whether,
Well, we're not talking about, I mean, we don't necessarily, we're talking about anything in the future also, right? So I'm not sure that there are people serving on multiple committees, but I've noticed again in other town websites that they do recommend that when it's possible, you kind of share the wealth, right?
I think that's another thing that the interview committee's always done. I know that the last round that we had zoning and somebody else at the same time, Leslie.
Mhm.
And library, maybe? I don't know what it was, but we elected to only appoint, somebody had applied for 2 different positions, and
Yes.
we elected to only appoint the person to one position. So I think the interview committee has always done that, you know, but I don't know if we need to be told to do that. Thoughts? Diane, do we have anybody that serves on 2? Some of the
There's a
different
couple people.
grants
Yeah.
and stuff.
There's a couple folks. I mean, again, the bottom line is it's it's the board's discretion, and at every appointment for every board and committee and every circumstance is going to be different. You just, you know, I think it's a good guiding policy of what you're, and being clear about what you're trying to do, but if you get overly specific, you're going to tie your hands in a situation where, you know, you might want to appoint somebody to 2 boards or committees. I mean, again, it comes down to the board's discretion, in my opinion.
Okay, and then my last suggestion, or question actually, is, should it say somewhere in here how long the terms are? Does it say, did I miss that?
Depends on the board or committee, but when you're appointed, typically they're 3-year terms. So when you're appointed, you're told, and if you go on the website, you can see the term of, you know, every board and committee. So it doesn't, I don't know that you want to list every board and committee's term here, because in some cases, for instance, the building committee, the term is for the duration of the project.
Right, well,
So-
that's a special committee, but the general standing committees, aren't they all
Isn't-
3 years, or?
Well, this is, most of them are 3 years.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if there might be a committee here and there that might have a different or longer term of service. I think by state law,
What's it?
the historical is it the historical commission?
Yeah. Well, the housing authority is a 5-year term for
Is
it.
5-year, there's like a limit on 2 terms, I think.
Cultural council
Cultural
Oh,
Council.
cultural council, I'm
by
sorry.
state. Yeah.
Right, but which is by state law. So it's not necessarily consistent, but I think most of them do tend to be 3-year terms.
Uh-huh.
I think the one clarification, and I believe I made it here, is that if you have a vacancy and you appoint somebody into it, that you're appointing them for the remainder of the term of that vacant seat.
Right.
From when it was previously appointed.
Uh-huh.
So the appointee at that time might be only serving a year or whatever amount of time, and then at that point, they'd be subject to, you know, consideration for reappointment for the full term, whatever that would be for the committee, so. But I don't think there's a need to state what the term is, because it's not even consistent necessarily across all boards and committees.
Okay.
Okay. So any other discussion on this? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move the board vote to approve the amended town code, chapters 912-010 and 912-011, appointments and reappointments to boards and committees as presented.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Okay. Okay. Status update, update on preliminary fiscal year 2020 budget.
So typically, at your second meeting in February, I give you an update on where things stand. We set the table for the budget goals and target increases at our December meeting, the financial trend monitoring. But I want to let you know kind of how things are unfolding at this point, and touch upon a few key things that are still in motion as we continue to develop the details of the budget. Just by way of reference, I'm not going to read all of the objectives under each of these goals, but the goals that we have established as part of our financial trend monitoring meeting with all the financial boards and committees, there are sort of 4 standing overall goals with multiple objectives underneath of them, but I'll just read the goals and not get into too much detail. But the first is to protect and improve the town's overall financial condition, which is defined as our ability to maintain existing service levels, withstand local, regional economic disruptions, and meet the natural demands of growth and decline and change. The second is to develop a budget in conformance with the town's comprehensive financial policies. As I state always when I talk about the budget, we don't do one-time gimmicks. You know, we're not going to roll expenses forward. We're not going to use an extraordinary amount of one-time revenues or draw from reserves to to balance our budgets. So everything that gets presented moving forward is always in conformance with our agreed-upon financial principles. Number 3 is to maintain Northborough as an affordable place to live and operate a business. Basically, this is the affordability piece of it, trying to make sure that the budgets that come forward meet the service demands, but also are sensitive to, obviously, the tax impacts. And then last but not least is to protect the town's long-run solvency, making sure that as part of this annual process, we're infusing a long-range perspective, particularly for things like unfunded liabilities, debt levels, pensions, and so forth, as well as making sure that we're putting enough money aside and investing enough in our capital assets and equipment and infrastructure. So those are sort of 4 standing goals that we talk about. And every budget we put together meets those goals and the specific objectives that are listed under each one of those goals. So in terms of the budget assumptions, at your previous meeting, we discussed state aid. Nothing has changed. We still only have the governor's budget to work off of, but all of our models assume a 1% increase in state aid. Right now, under the governor's budget, it's a 0.77% increase, so less than about 3/4 of 1%. I don't anticipate that's going to change much, but the 1% remains a good figure, and I think right now we're going to continue with that. We also discussed new growth. We're carrying $30 million in new growth. By the way, just the copies of the memo, these are going to be a lot of numbers I'm throwing out, but copies of the memo are available if anybody would like to follow along. New growth, this is new development in town. We originally budgeted $30 million. We're going to stay with that number. I actually included the chart from the tax classification hearing, which shows the 15-year average being about $36 million, and it's been declining as we start to approach, as a community, to build out. So it's important to always recognize when you're making budget decisions and you're looking at long-term implications of these decisions. It's always to be cognizant of what kind of an organization you are. Where are you? Are you a high growth? Are you mature and declining? Are you plateauing? You know, we're a maturing organization, and our overall growth in terms of new growth and development is leveling off, and we can anticipate that as we approach build-out, that's going to be the case moving forward, which means we're not going to get, $96 million in, new growth one year. We might get a significant development here or there, but by and large, I think we've plateaued, and we're seeing ourselves back at those historic levels. So those are kind of the budget assumptions, particularly the revenue assumptions. Lastly, local receipts. These are building permits, motor vehicle excise. Those are level funded. If you remember last year, we increased those by $300,000. Motor vehicle excise and hotel and meals. So those numbers were pushed last year. I'm pretty comfortable where they are. I certainly wouldn't be comfortable pushing them any further, particularly some of the issues we're seeing now with some of the restaurants in town. As you move into a recession, and I know I keep using this ER word a little too frequently lately, but I just read another article the other day where, again, 75% of, economists say, in the next 12 to 24 months, we're heading into a recessionary period. Don't know how bad it will be, how long it will be, but when we go into a recession, the first things that people cut back on buying are buying new cars, and building new decks and remodeling kitchens and things of that nature. So these are our elastic revenue sources, and they tend to move with the economy, and they contract when the economy contracts. And I know we discussed these in great detail in our meeting in December, but that's why local receipts right now, as I said to you in December, we're level funding those. So those are our revenue assumptions. In terms of outstanding budget items, there's 3 things that I think are really still in play as we continue to finish putting this budget together. The first of which is all of our collective bargaining agreements expire at the end of fiscal 19. So on June 30th of 2019, those contracts all expire. So that's 5 units that we're in negotiations with. So we're continuing to meet and working on those negotiations. If we settle those agreements, they'll have implications, but the reality is we will budget centrally moving into fiscal 20. We'll budget centrally projections on what we think those contracts will settle for. But if we settle any of them, then we'll update the departmental budgets that are impacted by those contracts. The other thing under collective bargaining, or under personnel rather, is, as you know, we have a classification compensation study that's ongoing. So right now, we are currently reviewing all job descriptions for everything that's not public safety, so not police and fire, but certainly covers the Northborough Municipal Employees Association, so DPW, library, admin, any non-department head level position. Actually, it includes department head level positions as well. But so we're reviewing all job descriptions, doing a market analysis to make sure that we are competitive. And if we need to make adjustments, either in individual job pay ranges or overall levels of benefits or anything like that, that will impact the budget. So again, this is a project that we anticipate will be completed, at least the classification portion of it, to be approved at town meeting in April. And those impacts will be budgeted again centrally, along with the impacts from the collective bargaining. But these are things that we're actively working on, taking up a tremendous amount of time and energy in our office right now. And as they start to develop, we'll be able to put a little bit more definition to what we think those impacts are going to be. Right now, we are just planning, budgeting centrally for what we believe the impact will be. The second thing you discussed at your last meeting, the DPW director and the town engineer came in and gave you a rather thorough presentation regarding trash, and particularly the changing recycling market. So right now, we are planning to increase the trash subsidy to the enterprise fund by $200,000 in fiscal '20. It's the increase that we're looking at from the market, as well as, it's an enterprise fund, so it retains its own fund balance, its own free cash. And so we've been applying that fund balance to the budget. Well, the fund balance is deteriorating because of the escalating costs. So overall, we're looking at about a $200,000 impact of tax impact to the trash. Again, you got a thorough presentation on that at your last meeting and a memo explaining that whole situation. But right now, we are in negotiations with a recycling center for that contract, and we're about ready to put the bid out on the street for the hauling portion of our contract. So we'll know a little bit more when that comes back. Again, we're holding allowances in the operating budget for those expenses. So that's kind of the general fund portion. Oh, I do have a spot of good news, which I've previously shared, but the viewers at home and people in the audience may not know. Based on the negotiated plan consolidation last year, we negotiated health insurance consolidation with all of the bargaining units to get our increase down to a reasonable amount. Based on that and some positive information, we're looking at a rate increase for the employees and the town of 0% for health insurance for fiscal '20. However, the budget will go up 2%, which is a very reasonable increase, and that's for administrative costs. We have a flexible spending account, and we're self-insured for some inpatient, outpatient type stuff. So, and we seem to have more subscribers. Originally, it's funny, just to go on a little bit of a side tangent, we have more people on the town's health insurance, and, I like to drill down into the numbers to understand what are the trends behind that, because I want to know, are we just picking up more people because we're attractive and we have very strong benefits? Working with the town accountant, the finance director now, we drilled down to some of those numbers, and really, I think it's largely a function of the baby boomers retiring, so they go on to our retiree health insurance, and then we hire new people, and they're taking our health insurance. So I think what you're seeing is you're going to see more retirees, which is demographically what you would expect. So it's not so much that more people are just rushing onto our health insurance. It's more an issue of the retirees are going onto our retiree health insurance, and then we're having to pay for replacement folks. So all of that stuff, a very reasonable, very enviable 2% budget increase in health insurance, which is absolutely phenomenal. That's what makes this other stuff fit, particularly things like the increase in trash that we're going to see. Lastly, from a global perspective, in terms of tax impact, the most critical thing that's facing the overall fiscal 20 budget, and by that I mean the general government budgets as well as the school budgets, is hands down the shifting enrollment at Algonquin Regional High School. We have 40-plus more students from Northborough, and Southborough has 10 to 13 less. And so we're just seeing a shift in that enrollment. And so that impacts our assessment for Algonquin. So when we presented back in December, we were carrying what looked like some pretty substantial numbers for the high school assessment. We assumed the assessment would go up 7%. It looks like that assessment is actually going to go up higher based on minimum local contributions, the Chapter 70 formula at the state level. The enrollment has a ripple effect through this very complicated Chapter 70 funding formula that the state does. And so we've been working extremely hard with the superintendent and the administration to try to bring in something that's reasonable. And I have to say right now, I cannot be happier or say enough about the way the superintendent and the school committee have acted responsibly to the global Town of Northborough organization. This is phenomenal that they know the high school assessment through no fault of their own is going to be very hard. So we were able to take advantage of some of the changing enrollments behind what's happening at the high school, particularly at the middle school level. The long and short of it is the K-8 budget has been approved and voted by the K-8 school committee, and it's coming in at 2.73%, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds right.
2.73%.
That's right.
So that's a little lower than the original estimate back in December. However, the high school assessment, we were carrying at 7%. That's going to come in at 8.38%. The superintendent and the high school regional school committee has worked to get their overall budget down from a 3.5% to a 3% to make this as reasonable as we possibly can. The reality is, if either of these budgets go any lower, you're talking about cutting staff and impacting programs. Superintendent's comfortable that this is reasonable, and she feels confident. K-8's already been approved. The high school budget will go to the regional school committee for approval on Wednesday the 27th. So again, these are big numbers, but just to kind of put this into perspective, if the regional high school budget, if their assessment rather, only went up 3.5%, which was our kind of our target, we would probably be digging into our levy capacity by about $547,000 less. That's the impact of this shifting enrollment from what would be a typical increase for us. So I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, but I know you guys are familiar. We talked about these in great depth previously. But this high school assessment, when it comes time for the tax bills to go out, it's that high school assessment that's going to create the biggest impact on those tax bills. And that impact is caused by shifting enrollments, not budgets that are out of control or decisions that are being made about the level of services by the superintendent of school committee. They've been tremendously responsible and responsive to the concerns of the management of the tax impact. That third goal of yours to maintain Northborough as an affordable place to live, that's what we're talking about here. So we want to make sure that we have a high level of services that we can be proud of, but we want to make sure that they're sustainable and that the tax impact is something that we collectively feel comfortable going to town meeting and advocating for. And I would hope when we get there that the Board of Selectmen and the Appropriations Committee would all be in support of these budgets. I think they're very responsible and very responsive, despite the fact that the numbers are larger than we would like them to be. But just by way of context, we had many years or several years, and the superintendent has a slide that she'll provide when she does her presentation. But there are years where Southborough's assessment was going up 10% and ours was level or 1%. And why? Because of shifting enrollments. So these enrollments will ebb and flow back and forth. The beauty of it for us in Northborough is that we're so conservative with our budgeting that we have levy capacity, so that when that ebb and flow comes back not in our favor. We're not in fiscal crisis. We aren't immediately requiring a Prop 2.5 override because we're a few $100,000 over our limits of Prop 2.5. So we know, based on the enrollment, this year, we're going to take a hit. Last year, we took a hit. Next year, it should be level. And then in 2023, it's actually projected to shift back the other way, where Southborough's enrollment will be going up higher than ours, so that will kind of flow back and forth. I'm very proud of the fact that, A, we've got this great working relationship, and B, we've managed ourselves well so that we have the capacity to deal with these natural ebbs and flows. Because if we didn't, we'd immediately be against the wall, and we would be talking about people. We'd be talking about staff. That'd be the only place left to go. So we're not there. The tax impact will be, a little more than we would like to see, but I think the budgets that are being brought in are very, very fiscally responsible, in my opinion. So that's the high school. In terms of key budgets, so the K-8 budget's going up 2.73%. The general government budget, so police, fire, DPW, is going up 3.5%, which was the target from December. The high school budget, as I said, is going up 3%, but our assessment is going to go up 8.38% based on those enrollment. We did get a little bit of good news as Assabet refined their budget, and our assessment actually went down about $40,000 from what we presented back in December. But again, our enrollment at Assabet is up from 41 to 45 students, so overall their assessment's up just a little over 13%. In some years it's down. We've had 2 years ago, our assessment from Assabet was down 130,000. Oddly enough, it was the longest presentation we ever had from Assabet at town meeting, and their budget was actually negative. So maybe since they have a good increase, we'll get a little faster presentation this year. So this is the shape. This is shaping up. These are overall, because of the movement with the K-8 down and the overall budget for the high school down, we are pretty much in line with what we presented back in December. It's probably about a $20,000 difference or so, but on a $60+ million budget, that's negligible. So again, it's a lot of work of everybody working together. Superintendent, school committees have been absolutely fantastic to work with. So within the town's 3.5, we're dealing with the wage increases, the trash, the class comp study, and potentially the addition of one full-time position, and that would be a facilities manager. But I'll present to you in greater detail about the general government budget at a subsequent meeting. So that's just an update. I've included on the back of the revised memo for you is literally the revised numbers I got from the superintendent at 3 o'clock today. There's only a minor changes to their assessment. And then the very last page is the overall budget, the revenue sharing model between the town and the schools. But we're looking at a general fund budget increase. So this is all the departments, the K-8 school, Assabet, and the regional high school. Overall, we're looking at a 3.4% increase. So as you've heard me say many years, in order to sustain our services, we need about a 3.5% increase to move with the natural demands and shifting requirements. As you all know, things don't tend to get cheaper, utilities and so forth, personnel costs, everything kind of escalates. So again, in my opinion, a very reasonable budget. More detail will be forthcoming, but I just wanted to let you know that the budget is shaping up basically just as we had projected and outlined for you back in December. So certainly can answer any questions anybody may have. Again, I know that was a lot of numbers, but I also know you're familiar with these numbers.
Thank you, John. Any questions or comments? Jason?
Yeah, I just want to thank John and the town staff, and also Superintendent Johnson and her staff and the school committees for doing all this work to try to pull all of this together. It's not an easy juggling act to react to these kinds of changes. The enrollment issue is one that we face every year. We're never quite sure exactly what the final number is going to be, and it's out of our control. It's not something that we can easily adapt to. So we've certainly enjoyed some past years when it went in our favor and
Yes.
affected our budget positively. So this is just the other side of that coin. I did want to ask, you mentioned we have 5 bargaining units up for renegotiation. I'm just wondering about the schools. Are they offset, staggered from us in terms of
Yeah.
their cycle?
Yeah, so the schools, all of our contracts expire June 30th of 2019. The school bargaining units, and I believe there's 5 of them, is 1 year off from us. So their contracts will be up in fiscal '20 for negotiation. And just one thing to point out is despite the fact that the contracts don't all line up, every single bargaining unit came to the table in good faith for the last 3 consecutive years to make changes to plan design and to do plan consolidation and other things to keep our health insurance budget reasonable. And I think we have a 9-year average of about 3.5% increase in health insurance over the last 9 years, which is phenomenal. We had, like, last year was sort of a tough year, about 8%, but now this year, we're looking at a 2%. You know, so the average has been phenomenal because everybody's worked together. But despite the fact that bargaining units were not at full table negotiations, they all came and through the Insurance Advisory Committee were willing to sit and talk to us and try to work out something that made sense for the organization as a whole. Again, it's about communication and collaboration, and it's a lot of information and process. Because anytime you want to make changes to somebody's health insurance, you want to make sure they're going to want all the information, and they're going to want to talk about it in a lot of detail. Which means, for me and my staff, last fiscal year, we spent 6 months talking and negotiating health insurance with 10 units, and basically every employee unit in the town. We've done that for 3 years in a row. So it's really nice for fiscal '20 to be able to come back and see some of the fruits of our labor and say 0 rate increases for everybody because we made these changes last year and we're going to get a dividend for that this year. And they were very, very, very thankful. I think I was more thankful. But so this is 3 years. So I'm not negotiating health insurance, but now we're negotiating every contract. So again, it's endless negotiations and communication, but it's all positive. Couple of things, dates I want to bring to your attention. So, and by the way, the Appropriations Committee's meeting, the Financial Planning Committee's meeting, going through the capital. On March 11th, I will make a presentation to you on the capital budget that's going forward to town meeting in April. The big project, as Dawn spoke to earlier in her reports, is going to be the design and land acquisition costs for the fire station. But we'll do a presentation on the 11th. And then the big one on March 25th, that's the joint public hearing between the Board of Selectmen and the Appropriations Committee on the budget. So at that point, everything's going to be locked up. Last moving parts are going to either be locked up or assumptions will be made, and we'll make that presentation to you on March 25th. So, but again, I'm positive that things are shaping up in the way that we had anticipated and as we had outlined to you back in December. So,
Leslie?
A couple quick comments. When I went to the K-8 meeting, their last one, is when they voted their budget, 2.73, and I have to say they did so happily.
yes.
They weren't arguing and trying to figure out why they needed to remain so low. They weren't picking at the budget and so forth. So it was, they all felt that that was reasonable and that was something they should do.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
cut
no.
you off. I mean, I can't talk enough about the collaboration with the schools, because it's not what you see in other towns. This could have very easily turned into a very difficult discussion, and, but the key here is they know when they need it, if something legitimate is up, we will, things will ebb and flow, we'll work with them. And the key here is we just share information incessantly, and we communicate constantly. And I think it's that relationship when we go to appropriations and we come to you, that knowing that process and knowing that you don't have school committee folks or staff or administration over there saying, you know, we didn't get a fair shake, or nobody's listening to us. Instead, they're saying, we want to work as, the culture here is phenomenal. I just can't say enough about that. Like, you go back 10 years, it was a bloodbath at town meeting. You know, people fighting over limited resources. Just, you know, this high school assessment would have drawn a lot of discussion and negativity, you know, going back 10 years. Now, we take the facts as we are, and again, everybody's just willing to do what they can to make it happen. The employees are willing to work with us, the different departments are willing to work with each other, and the boards and committees are all on the same page, and it's based on good information, good process, and transparency of information, and that's really the key to our success, so.
The other comment was that it'll be interesting to see what happens with the enrollments, because if there is indeed going to be a recession, that affects the enrollments, because fewer people send their kids to private schools in those
Yes.
situations. So that does affect the enrollments.
Unfortunately, it's usually less Southborough parents sending their kids to private schools. So, well, actually, that works for us because their enrollment goes up relative to
Right.
ours, so,
Exactly. So that's always an interesting trend to see.
yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. Next item, status update on the fiscal year 2019 snow and ice budget. Scott?
Okay, this will be quick.
That's good.
I'm being beckoned. Thank you for having me. We are just past the middle point of our snow and ice season for this year. Yeah. Yep, three out of 5 months, 3 out of the 5 months are
We tend to
over.
get most of the snow now.
Yeah, actually, last year was exactly that. So we're about 60% through the snow and ice season, and we're also about 60% through the budget as well. The budget was increased in FY '19 by approximately 10% to accommodate what was historically an underfunded budget item, which consistently went to reserves in order to finish off the season. So, again, we've spent about 60% of the budget in 60% of the time, and that's good news. We spent a lot of money on ice. You know, ice is the forgotten word at the end. Over past reports, you'll see on the second page, I've added a column that indicates salting-only events. So it's important to capture, you know, the number of times we go out and salt only, as this morning was. You know, 4 o'clock this morning, we're out salting the roads. There was no snow, nobody shoveled anything, but everybody's driveways were slippery. So the roads weren't when we were done. Salt is just as expensive as snow. You know, and on an hourly basis, when we have our plow contractors in, it's about $1,575 an hour. Salt event, it's the same thing with just our salt guys at the cost of the materials. So salt is just as expensive as snow.
Does anyone have, sorry,
Nope, that was it.
does anyone have a quick question? Go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm, the budgeted amount is based on a 6-year look back, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's a very realistic mechanism to use to set the budget in the first place. If we exceed that, then that just indicates an exceptional season
Correct.
where we had more events than
Yeah.
than anticipated.
When we averaged it out, sorry, John, when we averaged it out, we removed 15 from the calculation. So it's a 7-year look back for that one, because 15 was the triple blizzard
Yep.
year we had.
Yeah, I was going to say, keep in mind, you know, we do get, if we have an extraordinary event, a blizzard, we tend to get FEMA money, federal and state money, but oddly enough, we rarely get it in the year that we incurred it, so it tends to lag, you know, we get it the next fiscal year. But we try to keep a 6-year rolling average. That's about the best you can do. A number of communities, there was an article in the paper recently, and a number of communities sort of gave a wink and a nod of, you know, they underfund this because it's one of the only accounts that we legally can deficit spend and raise it in the next year's tax bill. We haven't done that in 10 years I've been here. We try to manage it within, and so sometimes we'll use that emergency reserve account, and we'll make some year-end transfers to try to deal with the fiscal 19 expenditures within fiscal 19 and not kick it to 20, even though you legally can do that. But the only thing to realistically do is to try to maintain about, a 6-year or 7-year rolling average. And there are years where we end and we have money left over. They seem to be fewer and far between, but that does happen. The other thing to keep in mind is in order for you, to us as a town, to roll forward any expenses in an extraordinary situation, you have to budget at least what you budgeted last year. So anytime you put money into snow and ice, it can never come back out again. So you don't want to just wildly throw money in. You want to have some sort of reasonable methodology. And honestly, this is the best you can possibly be doing. So every year, we wind up adding 50,000 or something along that range to the budget. And then, you get a couple of good years, and, we might be able to hold steady for a while. In fiscal '20, I'm not planning to add anything to this budget, so
Okay, any other
hopefully it'll be a
questions?
good, easy winter.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd.
I
On to your next
go check
meeting.
the door.
Okay. Review of preliminary town meeting warrant summary.
In your packet is a summary listing of the articles that we anticipate coming forward for April's town meeting. In total, there are 40 articles, and I'll just run through very briefly. Articles 1 through 13 are standard. These are the budgets we just talked about, the town, the schools, the enterprise funds. So those are the standard articles you see every year. Articles 14 through 22 are the capital improvement projects that I'll be presenting to you at your next meeting. And then Article 23 is the consolidated personnel bylaw. This hopefully will contain the classification compensation study that we just discussed, the results of that. Then Articles 24 through 29 are the community preservation projects, and we'll have a separate presentation coming up at one of your upcoming meetings on those projects. And then Article 30 is a conservation, a wetland bylaw update that was proposed by the Conservation Commission. So Articles 30 through 36 are basically the zoning projects, or the zoning amendments that are coming forward, requested by the Planning Board. By the way, I should mention, the article numbers are subject to change as we sort of refine this a little bit, but in terms of the number of articles we have, I'm using these article numbers in the draft. Article 37 is the Sunday serving time, 10 a.m. Sunday serving time. The presentation by Dudley Darling at your last meeting, the board voted to have this added. We have a citizen's petition to change the starting time for town meeting from 7:30 to 7. This was actually submitted a couple of weeks after town meeting last year. I hope the petitioners remember that they signed and submitted it, but it's still valid, and we have to bring it forward.
I actually did get a call from the petitioner asking me for support, so I think he remembers.
Oh, okay, very good, because they haven't reached out to my office, but the town clerk reminded me that we need to make sure that's on there. And then the last two citizens petitions are the plastic bag ban and the styrofoam reduction bylaw. So those are the last two. So in total, as I said, we're looking at about 40 articles. If you notice, we're short about 7 or 8 articles. Last year, we adopted the state statute to consolidate our revolving fund accounts, so we don't have to do that gyration of collapse them into one account and one vote and all that. So that's really one of the things that has shrunk the overall length of the town meeting warrant. But in any event, this is roughly what we have received. They were due, the deadlines were due back to me a couple of weeks ago. And so, again, the articles themselves are still being drafted and still being vetted, and then they will go to town council. And at your next meeting, let me just pull the schedule here. So at your next meeting on March 11th, you'll close the warrant, so there'll be no new articles coming on. And then the warrant will go to town council for review and finalization of all of the language, particularly the bylaw changes. And then at your meeting on April 8th, you would vote to post the warrant. So that's just the development of the document as it goes through. So Between now and your meeting on March 11th, we'll actually have the wording for each of the articles in there. There might still be some placeholders on the dollar amounts, but we'll flush it out a little bit more. But this is a good representation of what you can expect at town meeting.
Now is the time for citizens petitions, so submit.
No, the citizens petitions can come in right up until the board votes to close the warrant.
Any questions? Hearing none. Any other, execution of cemetery deed 1071.
Madam Chairwoman, I move the board vote to execute cemetery deed 1071.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Okay. Any other business to come before the board? Okay. Executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, litigation, ADA compliance, Aspet Park, SA Farms, due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding this matter in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
move the board vote to enter into executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Subsection 3, litigation concerning ADA compliance, Aspet Park and SA Farms, due to the chair's determination that a discussion regarding these matters in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the position of the board.
Second?
Julianne?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Leslie?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Aye. And we will come back in open session only to adjourn.